Today we're going to talk about preparing for that possible lump sum payment. Basically, things that should be considered before and after basically receiving your entitlement. But before we do that, just a little bit about myself. My name is Peter Smith. I'm a CPA, CA. I've been in public practice for 35 years. The slide is getting old, so it's probably close to 40 now. For most of my career, I concentrated on areas of audit and advisory services to First Nations and Indigenous business enterprises. And of that 20 years, I was a partner in a national accounting firm. The last couple of years, I've been working with GovernmentWise on all matters that deal with finance. So today we're going to talk about a number of different things. A lot of these sort of build up to lump sum payments and are necessary to understand what to do with lump sum payments. We're going to start talking about, or we're going to talk about wants and needs, and just making sure that everyone has. Oh, just hold on. Hold on. There we go. A little bit of a glitch. Anyway, we're going to talk about wants and needs. We're going to have a few slides on preparing a budget. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, but just the basics, just so people have a good understanding of what the concept is. And then we're going to talk about saving for the future, specifically setting up that rainy day fund, that fund that you need before you actually get into investing. And then once we talk about that, we're going to get into the different types of investments, things that you can put your money into if need be. And then using all of those first four, we're going to jump into lump sum payments and some tips and traps that go along with that. So first and foremost, wants and needs. And you always start off any type of budgeting presentation talking about wants and needs and making sure that people understand what the concepts are and what the differences are. A lot of people have troubles distinguishing between one and the other. A need is something that is essential to your day-to-day living. Examples of needs may be groceries, rent, basic clothing. That doesn't include designer jeans. It's basically socks and underwear. Whereas on the other hand, a want is something that you can live without, something that is not necessary to survive. And some examples of wants might include a video game, lunch at McDonald's, or that newest pair of designer jeans. So in most cases, you can distinguish between a want and a need, but there are categories where there are differences of opinion. Things like cell phones and computers, depending on who you're talking to and what stage of life they're in or what their occupation might be, a computer may not be important. A computer may be a want. But if you're talking to a student who needs that computer for homework, research, and everything else, that computer is actually a need. So depending on who you are and what you do and what your stage in life is, some of these things may vary. You just have to understand what is your needs and what is your wants. And once you determine that, you can basically begin the budgeting process. And the budgeting process, the cornerstone of a budgeting process is determining your wants and needs. So just moving forward, there's too many people out there that are living for the moment and don't think about the future. But as you grow And as you move out of the house and get a job and all of that sort of stuff, it's more and more important to think about tomorrow. Think about next week. Think about next month. Because if you're not thinking about those things, you're going to get yourself into trouble. In order to be financially successful, um, you need to think about these things, and you have to learn how to plan and budget your money. So just moving forward, we can talk a little bit about budgeting. And we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of budgeting. This is not a finance course. We're just going to talk about the basics and what you should have in your budget. A budget is a plan. It's basically a plan that includes wants and needs. And we talked about wants and needs, and everybody has a basic understanding of what that is. But it basically keeps track of how much money you earn and spend. It helps you organize your expenses, and it helps you control your expenses. And without doing that, you can definitely get yourself into a bit of a financial mess. Now, a budget is different for different people. But on the bottom half of this slide, we've got some main points that have to basically be in every budget. A budget has to be written down. If you're not writing it down, it's not going to happen. You have to write it down, because if you write it down, it's there, it's in your face, and it's something that you're going to look at every so often. It doesn't have to be complicated. It could be electronic, it could be otherwise. It could be there may be some people that have a huge Excel spreadsheet that covers all their budgets, but then there's other people that have that scribble that they're attaching to the fridge. And both of those are fine. As long as you write things down, you have a better chance of actually following that budget. Now, a good budget is also going to cover all of your needs. Those are the things that are essential. Those things that we had talked about, the rent and the utilities and loan payments, all of that sort of stuff. Things that have to happen every month. So a budget is going to cover all of those things. And it's going to allow for some of your wants. Not all of your wants. If you have a budget that has all of your wants in there, that you've either got too much money or not enough wants, because most people can't get everything that they want. A good budget will always give you a little bit of wiggle room. Room for error, room for change, because if your budget is too stringent, it's not going to work, because unfortunately things happen over time, and the budget has to change. So if you've accounted for every last penny, it's probably not going to work. But if you've allowed for every last penny except 10%, it probably will work, because you've given yourself a little bit of wiggle room. And the last is the budget is a good budget will allow you to save for larger purchases. And that's the main purpose behind the budget for some people, is to make sure that they're saving for that thing that they want. Maybe they want to buy a computer and they have to set aside $100 a month, or maybe they want to get that down payment for a car. If you build that into your budget, then you're better off, or you're more likely to achieve that goal. So when you're creating a budget, in very basic terms, you list all of your incomes, all of the money coming in, and that would include any employment income that you might have, some other income that comes in on a monthly basis, whatever your case is, whatever money comes in, you want on your budget. Like I said in the previous slide, you want to list your savings needs, the things that you are actually saving for, because that's basically your prize at the end of all of this. You want to be able to have that money set aside for that purchase. Of course, you have to list all of your expenses, dividing them between wants and needs. Needs first, wants second. And then you have to identify the time frame you want to budget for. And most people work with a monthly budget. Some people work with a monthly budget that extends to a year. I've seen people that basically just do budgets based on paychecks. You could have a budget for each paycheck. Your first paycheck, maybe you want to pay your rent, and your second paycheck, you may want to pay your car payment. It's basically up to you to decide what time frame, but it has to be manageable and it has to be something that you can foresee or see clearly into the future with. Now, here is a very, very, very simple budget, and this is the budget for a student that's living at home. In this particular case, we're dealing with a monthly budget. The income is basically just a part-time job, and I don't know, maybe a $50 check from grandma, who knows? So total income of $450,000. And then under the expenses, you have all of your wants and your needs. You listing your needs first. And in this particular case, because we have a student living at home, he doesn't have a whole lot of needs. He might have a cell phone, and he would consider that a need. He may need a bus pass to get to and from school, or some other form of transportation. So that might be a need as well. All of the other stuff is basically wants. Snacks, restaurants. I guess I spelled restaurants wrong, but that's neither here nor there. And clothing. So total expenses of $350, which leaves $100 to put into savings. And this person is basically putting that $100 aside because in a year's time or 2 years' time, he wants to buy that computer or upgrade his computer. Now, like I said, this is a very basic budget. If this particular student was living away from home, he would have a lot more needs. He would have needs such as rent, utilities, food, not restaurant food, but actual food. And the budget would be a little more complex, but this just gives you a basic idea of what a budget should look like. Now that we've basically gone through the concepts of wants and needs, we've gone through some of the basics in budgeting. We could talk about future savings. And as I was saying in the previous couple of slides, you want to put something aside because you want to have a goal at the end of the day. You want to buy that computer. You want to put that down payment on the car. You want to do something, but you have to have a means to do that. And this is also a segue into actual investing. But as far as savings for the future goes, the first thing that you should always consider is investing for that rainy day fund. And this would pertain to everybody. The first cornerstone of investing is having a rainy day fund. It's basically money that gets you through tough times, because you never know when that's going to happen. You never know when you're going to lose your job, or you have some unexpected expenses, or stuff happens. So you want to have something set aside. And when you're talking about a rainy day fund, you want this rainy day fund to be very, very conservative. And you want to make sure that it's just a simple savings account. Something that's going to pay minimal interest. It's going to be very safe. You're not risking the principal or the amount that you actually put in. And it's easily accessible because that's what it is. It's a rainy day fund. And when stuff happens, you want to be able to access it. And most people just set up a separate bank account. and make a monthly contribution, whatever you can afford. Again, it all depends on your stage in life. You could be putting in $50 a month, or you could be putting in $500 a month. It all depends on what you have available at the end of the day, but you should be putting in something. And then once you have that rainy day fund, then you could actually start looking at investments or other types of investments. But this is the cornerstone. You have to have this first, because if you are basically operating paycheck to paycheck, you are only 2 paychecks away from homelessness if you don't have any money set aside. So it is important to have something for that rainy day. So like I said, once we've talked about that rainy day fund, once you have that set aside, then you could talk about other types of investments, other things that you've heard about and are wondering about. And there's a number of different types of investments that you can get into. But before you actually invest in money, you have to determine what your risk factor is. Basically, how well do you sleep at night? Some people have a very low risk tolerance, and they want to be very conservative with their investments, and any little bit of risk will cause them grief. There's other people that throw caution to the wind and say, let's just go for it and try and get those high returns. But before you jump into investments, you have to basically determine what your risk level is. And when you talk to a lot of financial planners, that's basically what they start with, is how much risk do you want to take? Because everybody is a little bit different. And the basic rule is that higher risk investments tend to generate better returns. And that would also say that lower risk investments tend to generate lower returns. But the opposite is also true. If you have a high risk investment, and they say that this could potentially make 20%, it could also lose 20%. Whereas a low risk investment would be the opposite, in that you may only make 5%, but you may not lose a whole lot either if things go sour. So again, how well do you sleep at night, and can you afford to lose your investments? If you put $10,000 into an investment portfolio, is it the end of the world if it goes down to $9,000? If it is, then your risk assessment is probably a bit too high. But if you feel very comfortable riding the ups and the downs in the stock market, then that in itself is fine. So just going on to the different types of investments that you could have, just listing that from very safe to a really bad choice. Top of the line, when you're talking about GICs, treasury bills, savings accounts, those are all very safe. In those investments, you will never lose your principal or the amount that you initially put in, and your rate of return is pretty nominal in those. You'll get 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes even 5% on your investment, but not a whole lot more. When you're talking about stocks, you always hear about stocks and bonds. When you're talking about stocks are shares in publicly traded companies. In this case, you may buy shares of Bell Canada, or you may buy shares of Walmart, or you might buy shares of the Royal Bank. And basically what you're hoping for is, when you buy these stocks, they go up in value. And when they go up in value, you have gains. But of course, the opposite is also true. When it goes down in value, the same is going to happen in the opposite direction. Bonds sometimes are a little bit harder to explain, but in very general terms, um, when a company or a government wants or needs money and they don't want to go to the bank, they could issue bonds. So basically, the investor is the person that is lending the money to these companies. And with these bonds, you usually get a standard rate of return. But bonds are they could be risky as well because the bond is only as good as the company that issued it. So they go up and down as well. A lot of people are into mutual funds, and rightfully so. Mutual funds are basically just a group of stocks and bonds that are managed by a investment firm, and they group these to try and offset some of the gains and the losses. So it's not as risky as buying individual stocks and bonds. It's a sort of a hybrid. If you wanted to get into the stock market, you don't know a whole lot about it. You don't want to take a whole lot of risk. Maybe mutual funds is where you should be. Cryptocurrencies, extremely risky. Of every 100 people that invest in cryptocurrencies, probably maybe 10% make money. And rightfully so, they probably do quite well. But the other 90% usually lose money. So it's not something that is recommended for anyone who is at all concerned about trying to keep their money in their bank account. I would definitely not go there at this point. With cryptocurrencies, there is one example that I do have, and this is a real life example. This is a real life example. We have a gamer. That was his occupation. He was a gamer, and he was doing quite well. And through his gaming employment, he had generated $1 million in the bank, but he wasn't satisfied with some of the investments, so he decided he's going to do it all on his own, and he's going to go into cryptocurrencies. And again, this is a real life example. It did happen. It took him 2 months to lose that $1 million. 2 months. And in actual fact, he lost that $1 million plus 100,000 because at the end of the day, he owed the brokerage firm $100,000. He was on that computer every single day, buying and selling cryptocurrencies, trying to beat the market, and it failed miserably. So do not do that. The last one, casinos. That's not an investment choice. It's basically a form of entertainment, and the only thing that I say there is that casinos were built on losers and not winners. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's a recreation source, and you should always go into a casino with a set figure in mind, saying, this is what I'm going to spend, and when it's gone, I leave. So those are the types of investments that you can invest in, and at the end of the day, it does depend on your risk assessment, how much you're willing to put at risk, and just your personal preferences. Now, having known all of that, maybe we could talk just a little bit about lump sum payments, because that's what the name of the course was. Lump sum payments, and now that we're 80% through the course, we're going to talk about lump sum payments. But the build up to this is important, because you have to know everything prior to this to actually determine what you should be doing with some of these lump sum payments, and how best to manage that money. Lump sum payments require short and long-term planning. When you get a lump sum payment, there are certain things that you should always do, and those would be your short-term planning. You want to pay outstanding bills. If you have bills outstanding, if you have that cell phone bill that's outstanding, or if you have a layaway plan at one of the stores, you want to clear these things up. That's not baggage that you want to carry forward, especially if you have the money in the bank. Second, you want to clear any credit cards. Credit cards have extremely high interest rates. The interest rates range usually from 18% up to close to 30%. And usually there's no investments that will do better than that. So you always want to clear any credit cards that are out there, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to hold on to them. In the short term, you also want to take a look at any other debt that you have. I'm not saying paying the debt off, I'm just saying review other long-term debt. There is situations where you may want to pay it off and you may not want to pay it off. If you have a term loan, say you have to get a student loan of some sort, and you're paying 10% on that. Student loan's not a good example because it's usually interest-free until you start working. But if you had a term loan that had a 10% interest rate, you'd probably want to pay that off. Whereas if you had a car loan and it was 0% interest rate, you may think twice about actually paying that off, because it's not costing you any money. And you could take that investment and put it somewhere else where you can make money. So in the short term, again, review other long-term debt. Don't actually do anything in the short term. Just take a look at all of your options and weigh them all out. And the last thing that you should be doing in the short term is just consider and evaluate your large purchases. Again, you're not making any large purchases. You're just considering them and evaluating them. Do you really, really need that new car? Do you really need that new computer? Do you need that snow machine? Do you need that four-wheeler? All of those things you have to sit back and think about. And when you're thinking about whether or not you need them, you also have to think about all of the ongoing expenses related to those purchases. You have to think about things like insurance. If you have a brand new car and you're a student, your insurance could be $4,000 a month. I mean, a year. You have to think about ongoing repairs and maintenance if you're buying something mechanical. You have to think about just ongoing expenses. If you buy a car, are you going to afford? Can you afford to run it? You have to do oil changes. You have to put gas in it. All kinds of things that are going to be ongoing that have to be considered. But like I said, in the short term, you consider and evaluate these large purchases. You don't do anything right away. So basically, in the long term, you want to lock your investments in, and this in itself is not. This goes hand in hand with the short term, because what I usually would suggest is that on day one, aside from paying outstanding bills and credit cards, you want to put your money aside, lock it in somewhere, give yourself time to think. Give yourself time to review all of your options, and basically make sure that you make the right decisions before you do. You don't want to do anything on day one. And some people may lock their investments in for 30 days. Some may lock it in for longer, 60 days, 6 months, 1 year, depending on how long you think you need to evaluate your options. And then going forward, you can take those locked-in investments and you could stagger them, and you could use it to supplement your income going forward if that is what you want to do. Or some of these large purchases may not happen right away, and you can actually put that money aside, invest it, and maybe 5 years down the road, get that new car. But the key here is to basically give yourself time to evaluate. So in summary, you want to pay off all your existing debts. Whether it be your credit cards or your regular bills. You want to lock the remaining funds in a safe investment. You want to always stick to your plan. And at the end of the day, you also want to be a bit greedy. It's amazing how many new friends you get when you have money. You don't want to be that person that takes everyone out to the keg. You want to be a little bit greedy, and you want to basically say, that's my money and this is my future. So I have to be smart about all of this. Now, I just want to end all of this just with some tips and traps. Most of the tips and traps are based on what you should and shouldn't do with your investments. But a few things that you should always keep in mind when you're talking about money that you may have in investments or lump sum amounts that you may receive. Like I think we had talked about it briefly, but we don't want people picking their own stocks unless they're very knowledgeable. If you are going to jump into the stock market, it's sometimes better to get a financial planner or somebody that knows the markets a little bit better. If you go in and you set up your Questrade account and you start buying individual stocks, you're taking some pretty high risks, and you don't want to do that. Number two, never act on a hot tip you heard from your brother's girlfriend's uncle. And this happens a lot. Over coffee, someone will say, well, I heard there's a really good investment and you should put $5,000 in because you're guaranteed 20%. Most of that is BS. And the people that are telling you it don't have any more knowledge than you do in these situations. So never act on a hot tip. Never invest if you cannot afford to lose some of it. And that goes back to the concept of your rainy day fund. You want to make sure that you have that rainy day fund. So if you're investing over and above that, you could ride the ups and downs, and it's not going to be the end of the world. But never invest if you can't afford to lose some of it. The internet is often wrong. It goes without saying, anything that you learn on the internet, you cannot verify in some cases where the information is coming from, how accurate it is, and how old it might be. So there's lots of things that you have to be wary about. You can't go on the internet and start Googling stocks and assume that you're an expert, because it's not going to work. Number five, always be aware of fees and charges. When you're investing, the investment firm or the bank will sometimes charge you fees to get into investments, and they'll charge you fees to get out of investments. So always be aware of what's actually happening and what you're being charged for, because there are investments out there that don't have any fees attached to them at all, and whereas there's other ones that have huge fees. The higher rate of return, the higher the risk. We talked about that. That goes without saying. If it's too good to be true, it's not true. And finally, invest for the long term. Stay away from what's called day trading. Day trading is when someone is sitting at their computer and buying and selling stocks, trying to beat the market. And unless you're a professional, that is usually going to result in disaster. Either you're going to pick the wrong stocks, or you're just going to build up so many fees and charges that it's just going to eat away at any money that you did make. So lots of things that you could think about when it comes to investments and things that you can invest in if you do get your lump sum amount. So I am going to leave it at that.